Good afternoon, Mark Suttle, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane and Hurricane HD video blog for Saturday, the 13th of October, 2012. Rafael, the big story right now, as you can imagine, most of the convection on the east side of the center down here, really drenching the Lesser Antilles, the windwards, the leewards. The U.S. and British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, not so much yet, as most of that convection on the east side of the circulation center. The forecast track going to bend off to the northwest a little bit and then take a turn back to the northeast as a trough digs in off the east coast. You can see a little bit of a high pressure area trying to nose its way in to the north of the system. We'll take a look at that here on the upper level wind chart from the University of Wisconsin. Here is where Rafael is located, a little bit better organized today with that anticyclone sitting on top of it where the air is able to fan out in a clockwise direction. But then we have this mid-level ridge trying to build into the north, and that'll do a couple of things. That'll help to shove it off to the northwest a little bit, and then it'll turn back around and eventually head off to the northeast towards Bermuda, and eventually possibly up towards Newfounland. But this area of high pressure will also provide a better environment for this to strengthen once it gets through the Caribbean Sea. Looking at the vorticity signature at the 5,000 foot level from the University of Wisconsin as well. Wonderful tools you can get out there off the internet these days to help analyze what's going on. Kind of looks like a peanut, wouldn't you say? There, like a peanut, or it certainly is not round in nature, and that's what we're looking for, to see how round it gets. It was a little bit more round yesterday than it is today, and my suspicion is once it gets out of the Caribbean, and we see it up here in this region, let's say right about here, I suspect it'll be a lot more round in appearance as it feels that better environment to its north and west. Looking at the radar out of San Juan, like I said, mainly just scattered shower and thunderstorm activity anywhere from Puerto Rico here over through the Virgin Islands and the extreme northeast corner of the Caribbean Sea. Beyond that, down in the Lesser Antilles islands of the windwards and leewards, that's where the most squally weather is, and that's mainly because the system is heavily weighted on its east side. We don't see that banding wraparound moisture that you would see with a well-organized tropical cyclone, but that may happen, and we'll revisit this tomorrow in the update then as this moves off in this direction. I think once it gets up towards here, we'll start to see a lot more of that banding come through, and there may be some wraparound moisture that passes through this region that today is not doing too bad. Tomorrow it may be a different story, especially if this starts to intensify as it goes by. Here's a satellite picture, a different representation. You can see a little bit of a curved structure to it overall, trying to wrap in those bands to the center, but it's still pretty heavily weighted to the east side of the circulation center. And there's that high pressure area trying to build in from the north to the north of it, and that is where it will get steered a little bit back to the west a little bit more, and allow it to strengthen some. In fact, you can see that on the ship's guidance here, the statistical prediction model. 35 knots right now, not very strong, obviously. It's more of a rain event at the moment, but the statistical model here indicating it becomes a hurricane in just 48 hours, and then by the time it reaches near Bermuda and starts heading up towards Newfoundland between 72 and 96 hours, a respectable 75 knots, which is about an 85 mile per hour hurricane. And if it's strengthening as it goes by Bermuda, believe me, that is a different animal entirely than what you dealt with Leslie back in September. So, today the focus is on the Caribbean, but I think after today and tomorrow especially, the focus is going to need to be on Bermuda and what impacts may happen there. Looking at the GFS model over the next several days, this is valid Sunday morning. Here it is, just finally getting out of the Caribbean. Still going to be a kind of rough, miserable day down there with squally weather as the large circulation goes through the region. 48 hours and then finally 72 hours, getting pretty close to Bermuda, which is sitting right up here, and then it tries to go almost right over the islands there. Bermuda is not just one island, don't know if you knew that. And finally heading up towards Newfoundland by days 2 and 3 here, 3 and 4, 72 to 96 hours, that's what I should have said. Making a beeline up here for Atlantic Canada, so folks up there could be dealing with the remnants, the transitioning version of Rafael, where it loses that warm core structure. The wind field starts to spread out, its energy dispersing over a larger area, and then by day 5 it gets wrapped up here and entangled with another mid-latitude low that comes out of Canada itself, and it's all said and done. The rest of the tropics down here, by day 5, nothing else going on. However, I think as we move through the rest of the month, a favorable Madden-Julian oscillation, meaning an upward motion pattern that supports development, is going to move into the western hemisphere, and we might see 1 or 2 more named storms even after Rafael. We're already up to 17. We may end the season with 18 or 19 when all is said and done. Pretty remarkable for a season that was thought by some to not have much promise of being very busy at all. It has turned out to be anything but. And the good news with all this is that with all the activity we've seen, only a couple of impacts to land areas overall, and we're fortunate in that regard because we've seen when we have these really, really busy seasons that sometimes the impact can be life-changing, and so far for a broad area that hasn't happened this year. We'll keep our fingers crossed that that will remain the case. So the big story right now will be Rafael and the impacts on the Caribbean, and then eventually Bermuda and Newfoundland. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. That's my website. Always glad to produce these videos for you on Hurricane and Hurricane HD, and I'll do it again for you tomorrow.